Hello, I'm Paulo Rocco, and you're listening to Reprint, brought to you by the Temple News. Your in-depth look into the stories you need to know about. This week, I speak to Temple Tomorrow and TUnited, the two campaigns running to represent TSG next year, about what their policies are and what they would do if they were elected. So we're here with Temple Tomorrow.
Yeah.
If you two just want to introduce yourselves to the audience.
Yeah, sure. I am Janeese Hochstetler. I am the running vice president.
Yeah, I'm Lourdes Cardamone, and I'm the campaigning president with Temple Tomorrow.
Yeah, awesome. So, tell me a little bit about why you guys decided to run.
Yeah, I think I was definitely starting to think about it since I've been in TSG for like consecutive 2 years. So I was like kind of talking about it. I was moving up the ranks a little bit, thinking about it. And then, Jan has had experience. So we were kind of chatting on what that would look like. And I just felt like personally very inspired by my current TSG peers and that whole group. And I really, really love what I do. And then, for you.
Yeah, I just have full faith in Lourdes, and I wouldn't want to run with anyone else. I've also been in TSG, like she said, so I was definitely interested in this position. I was originally a director 2 years ago now, and yeah, I felt capable to take on this role. I'm super excited about our policies. Yeah, I was excited.
Yeah, awesome. The debate was yesterday. How do you two think that went?
I feel really good about it. I was definitely a little nervous. We were prepared regardless of what it was like, if it was going to be a typical, rebuttal type of thing, or if it was just going to be presenting. Like Jan was prepared, we were preparing together. So I think, it went really, really well. I had a lot of fun. I love a good debate, but I did really enjoy doing that. I think the results were positive, at least from people who came up and chatted with the pair of us afterwards. Were seeming very interested in it, or just curious and wanted to ask questions. So that was really exciting because I enjoy getting to talk about the policies that we're running on more in depth.
Yeah, I think Lourdes did amazing. There were definitely a lot of questions we were excited to answer, and I was interested to see what people had for the Q&A. I think she had a lot of good answers to those. I think with the other component and the other campaign, they couldn't even name something that they didn't like about our policy, so that was a pretty good sign for us. So yeah,
for sure. To that point, I know the VPs didn't really get to participate. Is there anything you would have wanted to add, maybe change what she said, or push back on?
Nothing to change. I think she did an amazing job. I would maybe this wasn't fault to Lourdes, but I would have loved to go into some of our other policies as well, or have people ask some other questions. I know a lot of people were focused on expression, which is super important, and advocacy. So I love that they people were asking questions in general, but we have 5 big policies that we're running on. And I would love for people to know a little bit more about them, but that's really the only thing I would add.
Yeah, for sure. In your conversations with students, faculty, community members, what are some of the common problems you're starting to see arising? And, what are you seeing that they expect from you if you were to win?
Well, I think it's a very diverse spectrum. On one end of things, kids are going to be like, so wait, why aren't you changing my tuition? As if we have that power. But on the other end of things, there's, I've never heard of Temple Student Government. What is that? And so I think neither are necessarily a bad or good thing. It's just honestly, educating people what exactly this institution is and what it entails. But I think honestly, the biggest thing that kids want overall is a sense of community, a sense of belonging, and a place to voice their opinions. Yeah. So obviously, I cannot change your tuition, unfortunately. Right. And I wish I could, because I know it's a hefty price these days, but we can't do that. But I think it's that kids just want to be able to have a forum to explain, hey, I'm feeling really frustrated with X, Y, Z. And I think that's kind of been the biggest thing, is kids just being like, oh my God, wait, you want to ask me? Let me tell you. Yeah. Which has been a big one. I don't know, what else? What have you seen?
I think a lot of people are, especially if we're going into classrooms and, presenting or giving class, things for our endorsements. Number one thing I feel like people have been asking is specific things that they want to see change, whether in their classes or, with their specific schools and administration. And I think a lot of people don't realize what we have experience with is you put in a policy, you do this whole roadmap, you go through, could be months, weeks longs of this process. And then, you have so much planning, and then you take it to administration and it gets held up there, or it gets like shut down immediately.
Right.
So there's definitely a lot of background things that people don't know that goes into student government. Like we are working the entire year doing things and working on projects that can take up the entire year, and you don't see anything come from that, but it's someone's like literal whole year process. And so that can be really frustrating, especially when you're like advocating for the school, you're advocating for the students, and people aren't seeing the like weeks and months of work that are going into it, but it's like they're only seeing what's not happening or what's getting shut down.
For sure.
And so explaining that like on a platform of like, we have this experience, we know exactly what we can run on, we know exactly what we can get done. Like we didn't put anything in our policies that we don't think is tangible. I think is really important, because I think we know there's a lot of logistics that go into backgrounds, and a lot of students don't necessarily see that, and they see like, oh, we're in a position of power, like, oh, you're talking to administration, like why is X, Y, Z not getting done? So I think knowing that and explaining that has been super important, because it's putting people's perspectives in a little bit of a better headspace, I think, because I have to explain like, hey, I can't actually change like why intramural sports like are super expensive. Like that's not actually something I can really do. So we do have a lot of power in certain ways, but also in some ways we actually like can't be doing that much. So
100%. Shifting over, looking specifically at your policy, what do you guys think is like the most pressing issue you have, and tell me a little bit about it.
Like with our policies?
Like, or maybe something you're particularly excited about to kind of change if you were to win.
I think personally, like from our perspective, we talk a lot about like logistics and behind the scenes stuff, that like the structure of Temple student government and how that kind of works. And I definitely, want to shift that around a little bit. I would love to have, a executive level, like cabinet level position for DEI efforts. I think that's now way more important than ever before. Not that it's never been important, but I think when these are issues that are being continuously talked about in DC, but nationally and threatened, I think that's really important, because regardless of what the federal law says, regardless of what the White House says, everybody deserves to be here and advocate for themselves, regardless of what their identity or how they present themselves. And so I think personally, that's one that's really, really big to see. Over this past year, we've had really heavy conversations about students' rights, or students, how they are expressing themselves, how they're feeling unsafe or not, or feeling safe in this location but not this location. So these are like hard topics that we talk about with admin and, TUPD and whoever may be involved, that I think it's really important that we have somebody to advocate for that at an executive level, because like our directors are incredible and they're great, and they're little babies who are really excited about this few policies that they really want to get done. They did not sign up to have these really harsh and intense meetings with admin. So I think that's really important, especially now more than ever, with that being so pressing in the news, and also just a way to bring in more people, because then with that we want to really expand like committees and like ensure like committees are being set in stone, that there's sort of just it's very systematic for people to just join committee, then maybe they join TSG the next year. So it's like we're kind of continuing this chain of people getting involved, instead of like starting a new committee every year and having totally new folks. So I think like those are the two big, like at least structural things to bring in more people. I want more kids on committees. I had this really sweet girl come up to me after the debate and ask, like, you're talking a lot about student leaders. What about those of us who aren't? Like, what about those of us who are just students, not just general body? And I was like, no, girl, I don't want these student leaders on these committees. Like, they're great, but they're leaders for a reason. Like, I need them somewhere else. But like, we need students, any student from wherever, to be on these committees. So I think like those are some that I'm really passionate about. And I think kids are really excited to be able to advocate for themselves. And I know, you're really passionate too about or sustainability and affordability.
Yeah, I think specifically like Temple, coming from the background of having like underprivileged kids or like inner city kids, and just in general like being a lower income school sometimes, I think is super important to me and personal to me. So I think affordability is something that I really want to work on, like within hopefully our year term if we get elected. I like working with secondhand like caps and gowns with the sustainability and working like with the new school that's being built, like with their textbooks exchanges and different, like, Too Good To Go we want to work with again. And just like a whole bunch of different programs that are kind of already being done in TSG, but continuing on and adding more to that, because I think affordability is a really big thing, and something that we should continue to work on, especially with tuition increases like that have been going on for the last like 5 years still. And we have a huge enrollment class coming in this next fall. So yeah, really making it prevalent in something that I want to work on, like with administration, talking to you about, and consistently like being transparent with the student body of like what are hidden fees going into, and like why do we have printing allocations? Like why do we need $35 like built in when a lot of kids like don't use it and don't even know like why it's being built in. And just different ways. I think there's a lot of ways that there are things like locked into our tuition and in things that kids aren't seeing, and they're like, why is this being billed, or like why do I have money for this? So making like an itemized bill list almost of like what actually is going into your tuition, I think is important, like for transparency, but also just in general, so you can like see and like figure out why, and like if there's anything that we could like remove or block out. I think that's super important, something I would love to work on. And also student voices and representation. We keep pounding it, but we are really big into advocating for the student body. So I think making a digital platform where kids can reach out and, write their concerns about like what's going on. Either we directly like work on a policy with them, or directly figure out concerns that they have and things that they want to see TSG work on, or things that we can actively talk to administration about. But also remembering that we are also just students, and we are being invited into these spaces with administration. It's not just like a given. And it's super exciting when we get to be, invited into the board of trustees and invited into these meetings with administration where, not everyone has that opportunity. So taking that seriously and taking that with a great responsibility is something that I'm excited for. So
100%. Yeah. And to that point, this is kind of a multifaceted question, I feel like, in terms of like advocating for students and protecting their rights. I think Temple is a place where people are not shy to make their opinions known, and I think that's a really special part of the university. How do you plan on supporting freedom of expression and students' right to assemble and express themselves how they please on campus?
Yeah. That's so fair, so valid. I think that's a pressing issue for a lot of us students, because it is something that's being thrown up and around in national news and especially within universities. And I think like that's my favorite part about being a college kid, being in university, because everybody is so fiery and passionate, and like when else are you going to get this opportunity? So that, for one, we talked about that being really, really important to us to like preserve with everything that we can to make sure students are still getting that right, and ensuring that they're being actively represented in any way possible. And whether that be, we're talking with TUPD to make sure that all of these protests or demonstrations are going to be done safely and effectively, or we're talking with students on here's how to legally do it, here's how to peacefully do it, these are your rights, so that kids are able to continue to do that without, getting in trouble, getting hurt, making sure that we're prioritizing student safety and well-being. And then also just like really pushing for students to be able to like advocate for themselves also with government, either that is student government or local government. I think we have a really, really great director of government affairs. Like I oversee him currently, and he's great and amazing. But I think like that's a really good opportunity for students to get connected, to actively then take these activists and these people who are demonstrating and take them to City Hall to advocate for what they really want, or taking them to Harrisburg. So I think like there's a lot of ways that we want to not only ensure we're doing everything we can to protect them, but also encouraging students to advocate for themselves in different ways as well. Because I think protesting and demonstrating is some of the most powerful ways you can do it. I think anything good and big that's happened has, one, stemmed from young people, but two, been grassroots. So very much by the people, for the people, ground up. So I think it's really important to also show these kids how to advocate within systemic structures as well. So whether that be student government or going to government or going to admin, like we want to show kids like, one, we can be a liaison to you, to admin, but then also we want to help you and support you and give you the resources that you need. I think is important.
Yeah, I think it's really an exciting time, like as though it's very tumultuous within, the federal government right now, and also just like anything with administration wise. And we, like Laura said, we're all for self-expression. I think being a nonpartisan club, like with student government, is also really important because, I mean, we are very political people inherently. And so I'm excited to not necessarily be political when it comes to student government because we're so political in other genres of our lives. And I think sometimes it can be hard when you're going through these really big, tough conversations and you're in this giant organization and people are looking out to you. Like there were a lot of issues with different things happening this year with student government and like coming out with statements or like how like the administration like handled certain things. And so within this next year, I would hope that we would have a good things to say and just be able to be honest and transparent with the student body in a way that reflects hopefully all people and not just like personal views and like what's going on within general view points on things. But I think it's super important that we keep honest and we allow people to express how they want to express. We obviously like don't condemn like violence and things that are like big public displays of like things. But working with the TUPD I think would be really important. Working with the student body, being, you know, transparent of like this is what we would love to see for you guys. So,
without condoning violence, but also being like, but here's how you don't get in trouble with the cops.
Yeah.
Sure. Obviously, here's how you do this peacefully. We want to be safe, but also here's how you make sure you don't get arrested. Because I think that's really important too, because who are we to tell you not? Like, we would never tell you not to protest or demonstrate. Sure. So us explaining this is going to be not to deter people from doing it, but to show kids how to do it a right way that they aren't going to be getting in trouble, because we can't be having our kids get arrested.
Right.
And that's really important. I think a lot of people don't know that either, how to address themselves with cops or how to peacefully protest or legally protest. It's like, that's a big one. Like, we want kids to be able to do that in a legal and safe way.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. Again, to that point, but you know, campus safety seems to be top of mind for stakeholders and students every year.
Yeah.
What's your current view of this campus safety situation right now? And do you have any plans to change that? No, I know you do. So tell me about them.
Yeah. I think for one, like, that's such a prevalent issue, and it's always going to be, because I think Temple is so newly, good Lord. It's so located in such a central area within North Philly. It's so urban, it's so open that it's not going to be gated in a way. So we're going to come with our new issues that universities who are very closed in might not have. So I think that's always going to be a big issue that hopefully people can understand, that this is not going to be changing from administration to administration, both, you know, the actual president of Temple and also TSG. So like, one thing we want to ensure is like, we're ensuring like systematic change is going to be sustainable and it's going to be effective for long term. So I think we really want to focus on not only acknowledging that public safety is not just physical, but it's also mental and emotional, and acknowledging that students are experiencing these insane, crazy acts of physical or emotional violence. And then, you know, you're like, okay, well, here's Titleman. Like, there's Titleman counseling, where it's like, that's putting a Band-Aid on it. And kids aren't actually aware. How many times have you clicked the link for the Titleman counseling link, like when they send an email? I've never clicked it once. Not once have I ever clicked it. So I think it's really important that we want to have kids be able to advocate for themselves in that space, know exactly where to go. Like within, you know, TSG, we have our own website. We get a little page on, you know, TU portal, like making sure top of the list, these are all the locations and the resources and the times and, you know, whatever you need to know to advocate for yourself. And then also pushing, you know, student leaders, like Jan mentioned, like, you know, even within student government, there's this, you know, sort of unique burden of representing people, but so is any position within leaders. Like you within Temple News, like you hold a certain set of power that, you know, the general student body may not, and people are going to feel comfortable to coming to any student leader to chat with them, to talk to them. And these are kids coming who are going to maybe be in a crisis. They're struggling because they've been a victim of assault, or they're struggling with PTSD, or whatever the case may be. We want student leaders to also be mandated in some first aid training, both like physically, because I think that's just really important to know, but also mentally, how to handle somebody who's having a panic attack, how to handle somebody who's, you know, just experienced the worst crisis of their life and they really need support, and also for themselves to be able to advocate for like, where am I going to go for that? So I think that's a big part, in addition to physical safety. Like we really want to work, you know, continue the efforts with TU Flight, working on improving that, making sure students have a good relationship with TUPD. And of course, then, you know, furthering the notion that it's not just physical, but it's also emotional and mental. And we want kids to be able to advocate for themselves.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, specifically like physical things that we do want to change, I am really interested in the blue light systems right now. Most of the, I've been around campus, walking on and off campus, and a lot of them are down right now or like out of service or have like blockers on them or don't actually work if you've actually pressed them. And that's a huge safety concern. So, and we have so many that we love to highlight on tours and we love to talk about, but like, are they actually working? And I think having a testing for them is super important and getting them back up. Because a lot of our kids do live off campus and we're going to have full housing for all of our, on campus housing next year. And I think that's super important that we are, if we're going to be advertising that we're having these safety measures in place, that they actually work. So working on that for sure, specifically. Like Laura said, for flight, we want to work on the technology for it because if you've been on the flight app, it's literally terrible. Super clunky, very just like kind of outdated, doesn't really work. It's not updated. So I want to work on that. Working on like walking escorts and like there's just so many safety measures put in place, but like, are we actually using them? Or do people actually know how to use them? And like, are they being advertised in a way that people know what's going on? I know you get like I think you get a packet now when you're a freshman of like, here are all the safety things you can have, but like, and they make you download certain apps, but like how many times do like, you need to call medical amnesty and you don't know the number and you have to like call 911 on accident or like, not on accident, but like, it's not actually necessarily resourceful for you. So I think also specifically something I would love to do is like speak a convocation or something with all the freshmen and like introduce ourselves first off, but also just talk in general about like, here are actual resources for you. Here are safety concerns. Like we'd love to have free Narcan in the TSG office at all times and just like have, first aid training and like mental health training, like she said, for student leaders, but just in general, people can come to us like as student leaders, like, I would want people to feel safe and feel like they can come to us. And like sometimes going to another like trusted adult or like higher adults is needed, but like how are you getting to them and how are you accessing them and like where are they advertised so that you know how to get them? And Temple has so many resources, but finding them can be kind of like a maze and all of the websites and like where are they located actually on campus. So getting that out I think is a really big concern for us.
So community engagement I think is really vital because of our location on North Broad. So, we've touched on it a lot already, but, not only talking about the relationship between students and TSG and the university and students and all those dimensions, but also looking at the university as a whole and the community that surrounds it. How do you plan to, better engage everybody and bring everybody closer together?
Yeah, that's a big one also touched on in the debate, which I love talking about because I love the director of community engagement now. Like he's great and he's amazing. His name is Wes. He's also working for our campaign, but he's great. But I think like in general, our community outreach is probably really, really important specifically for Temple, like I said, because we are directly in the North Philly community. I think it's not a secret that Temple is founded on gentrification. Like that's not something that I think you need to hide, but it is the truth. It's what happened. And I think now reconciling with that, we have to understand that these are families and people who have lived in these homes for decades or maybe have been pushed out to these homes recently. But like these are communities and families that already exist. And like our community is very much, an evolving door. You come here for 4 years, 5 years, and then you leave and then new people come in. So I think it's very much, we want to push students to then engage further with the community, however that may look for them. So obviously like the Good Neighbor Initiative is really, really great, something that TSG works with, but obviously like I want other kids to be able to join and understand like what that really means, what even is the Good Neighbor Initiative, because breezing over it when you're doing orientation stuff as a freshman isn't enough. And also like implementing that, for STARS requirements, like furthering that, like what it already is, you have to do a community service event with an outside organization, which I think is great, but also ensuring that people are going to this event, that you're getting students excited to have these different things happening that are going to better the society and the community and not just very surface level. Like I think it's very easy to say we're going to go do, pick up trash on our block. And I think that's great and amazing. And TU Cleanup Club does an incredible job and they're out there every week. But you doing it one single time and cleaning your block isn't necessarily going to make the biggest difference. So I think it's also promoting, actual sustainable change and working with organizations that already exist, like Community Gateway, or, I know Ideal does stuff with, Video Office does stuff with the community. And so just like really encouraging kids beyond TSG to value their community that is North Philly and value the Philly community.
Yeah, and I think also asking people and residents and Philly natives like what they want to see, because I think that's super important. And I think sometimes we come out here and we're, like Laura said, revolving door. We're only here for like 4 or 5 years, and then we're kind of doing things that we think the Philly natives would like, or think that people would want to see, but like, is that actually something that they want? Is this actually something that they tangibly would benefit them? And I think it's super important to get out and talk to people, talk to residents, like talk to your neighbors. Like, do you know them? Like, I know you're living next to them for maybe a year or two, but like these people have lived here for years or generations. So being friendly with them and being able to ask like, hey, is this like, what would you like to see in the community and neighborhood? Like, what is something that we can work on that you would love to see? Like, is it the trash in the neighborhood? Is it the sound? Is it what specifics in general like we can help with? I think is something that we also need to be aware of, because sometimes I think we do what we think is helpful or needed, but it's not necessarily something that people want all the time. So yeah, being more aware of that. I think they started the Humans of North Philly when I was still in TSG. I don't know if that's still going on, but I think I would love to like do that again and start that back up, because that was like a really interesting gateway, I think, of starting like talking to people in the surrounding Philadelphia area. And I would love to hear stories of like what's going on in our communities. And it's also something I need to work on. Like, am I talking to my neighbors? No. Like, I need to be talking to them. I think that's something that's super important.
Yeah. 100%. Well, we don't have time to touch on every specific on the policy, but if there's anything I missed out or left out that you'd like to bring up that you're super pumped about, please do. And, tell the people why they should vote for you.
Sure. I mean, vote for Temple tomorrow, because all of our policies are feasible. We know for a fact, Jan said, we did not run on anything that we don't know with 100% certainty that we're going to be able to start the ball rolling in some sort. A lot of them we feel very confident that we'll be able to do. And also, as Jan said, when the opposing team cannot think of a single policy that they would disagree with or not want to promote, then I think, that's how like these policies are rock solid. So we are not real politicians. We are not running on something that we know we can't promise. This is not, we're going to do all this amazing things, but it's never going to happen. Like, these are going to happen. Hopefully, if this goes the way we would like it to go. And so I think like that's really important, but also that we're very much open to having any student, like, criticize what we're doing and offer a solution. So we have already, like Jan said, we want a big feedback platform that's online for kids to, give their thoughts, which obviously with a 2-week campaign, we have a Google form, but it is linked on our Instagram. And like, please talk to us, please DM us. Like, we want to hear from students, and that is never going to change. Like, we want face-to-face. If this election goes the way we want it, like, I want to continue visiting classes, and I want to continue tabling outside and canvassing. Obviously, I'm poli-sci unbiased. I love canvassing. But I do think it's important that we are not going to be some faceless, scary, all right, I think these are policies kids want, but it's actually just what I want. And I don't, like, we want to listen. We want to hear kids. And, like, we are you. We work multiple student jobs. I'm from out of state. Jan is from in-state. Like, we're people of color. Our team is, like, full of women. Like, we're queer. We're involved. We're student leaders. We're in Greek life. We're in everything. So it's like we have this lived experience that I think is really invaluable.
Sure.
Yeah, I think I think we are super passionate. I think we have the experience and we have the research and everything to back it up of what we're saying. We are excited about, what the outcomes could be for this campaign. And if, we're elected, we're going to hit the boots to the ground immediately. Running immediately. We have, so many ideas, but we have so many great people under us right now with our campaign. We wouldn't be able to do it without them, but also just in general, I know within this next year, hopefully, if we get elected, we would have so many amazing people on our team and so many great communities and things where people, these ideas could get done. We say so much, but it's like, how much are we actually doing if we don't have a team? So
now I speak to TUnited about their policies and what they would do if they were elected. We are with Yaam from TUnited. Unfortunately, Billy, the VP, could not be with us today. But tell me a little bit about yourself. Introduce yourself to the audience, and tell us why you're running.
Okay, yeah. Hi, I'm Yaam. I'm a sophomore at Temple studying psychology, political science, and economics pre-law. And part of the reason I decided to run was long before I ever actually applied to run. When I initially committed to Temple, it was on my way home from a tour. And at that tour, there was a Spider-Man at the bell tower. And I looked at my sister and I said, this is going to be my school. I'm going to love it here. From there, I committed. I came here and I was like, I really like it here, but there are clear issues within the structure of the university, safety-wise and community-wise. Community engagement, I feel like you don't see a lot of that, or at least not as much as I thought I was going to after touring.
Sure.
So I decided to run, and I decided to curate a team of students that come from various different backgrounds, that we all come from various different locations, families, ethnicities, races, politics, just all of it. We're just such a different group of people, and we managed to work together to create policies and create what we think could be a very efficient and effective student government that appeases all students instead of just a select group of students.
Yeah, for sure. So the debate was yesterday. How do you think that went?
Yeah, I mean, I came from a town where the average graduating class was 110 kids.
Yeah.
The most amount of students prior to campaign presentations that I'd ever spoken in front of was 30 kids.
Mm-hmm.
So public speaking isn't exactly my forte.
Sure. Yeah.
And I do want to acknowledge that. But I don't think it went horribly. I just think I wish I could have been less awkward. I feel like I came off very awkward, and I feel like I come off very awkward when I'm speaking in front of a crowd. But when I'm more personal and just one-on-one with people, I feel like I come off more personable instead of like a shy, soft-spoken, scared person. And I fear that's how I came off during the debate. But I also think I definitely articulated some of our policies, but I did completely forget some of the other ones just out of fear of standing in front of such a large group of students.
Sure. No, completely understandable. I know it was unfortunate that the VPs didn't really get to participate in the debate as well. I don't know if you've talked to Billy at all about it, but was there anything that he might have wanted to add or, get across?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, one of Billy's main things, and he's so passionate about it, is just transparency.
Mm-hmm.
One big thing that we struggled with while applying was the transparency, finding the Constitution, finding the election code, being able to know exactly what we need to be able to run, as well as what current student government was doing and what they're trying to do. We just felt that there was a lack of communication there.
Mm-hmm.
And he came up with the idea of meeting minutes, which is where we have a secretary in all of the meetings, and they go in and they write everything down and publish a very detailed summary of what was discussed and how to continue from there. He also, we stressed it a lot, or I did, was the Student Senate. That was something that we mutually agreed was necessary. Also, while looking at the Constitution and election code, we realized that this is something that probably should have been in place and was once in place. And yeah, he's great. But we also went into it with the impression that he was going to be up there speaking with me.
Sure.
Which is why, there were certain things that I didn't hit. But we do have, 2 pages just about transparency that he worked really hard on. I went in, I checked. My entire campaign staff checked. We have 15 people on our campaign staff. So it was just this deep dive into transparency with him. And he was really great about it.
Yeah, 100%. Kind of moving on, in your conversations, you've been out there campaigning and stuff, in your conversations with students, faculty, maybe some community members even, what are the common problems or common threads that continue to arise, and what are they kind of expecting from you if you were to win?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone's expecting anything other than what we're trying to bring forth.
Sure.
So we actually have palm cards, which are just a very, very abridged version of our main policies. And we've been handing those out, and there are some stuff that are were once in place that are no longer in place. So people are loving the concept of a dead week. Prior to COVID, we used to have 3 to 4 study days before finals. We no longer have that. They took it away during COVID because most tests were online. Why did you need more than one study day? Specifically because many were open note. But now you're back in these full-time classroom settings, and you have one study day. My freshman year, fall semester, I had 3 finals back to back to back on the first day of finals.
Okay.
I did not have enough time to study for all of those. I did fine, I passed, but that is not enough time to study. There's a reason that initially we had 3 to 4 study days.
Right.
And one big reason we decided to go for Dead Week was just because we didn't want to add time to the academic calendar that felt like the calendars are set like 2 years in advance.
Mm-hmm.
So doing that, we just thought would be more difficult to implement than a Dead Week, which a lot of professors already can get behind and can already understand the concept behind it. And that's one that I know students are really loving. Safety. Safety is a big one I've run into, a big one a lot of people that just live on campus have run into. And the blue light system was one I personally had an encounter with where it didn't work my freshman year,
It's
which
horrible,
was terrifying.
Yeah, I'm sure.
You do not want to be put in that situation. And when students hear about that and hear about the fact that some of these blue light systems don't work or that rally point H is currently cut off, it's a concerning thing because you don't think about it until you need it.
Yep.
But when you need it and it doesn't work, it's absolutely terrifying.
Yeah.
There's no other word for it. But it's that. And then also, I actually posted something on Yik Yak that was like, what is something you guys want to see? And it was safety, community engagement, and just like, I think there were 4 things. It was so long ago, I don't even remember. But the one that got the most attention was community engagement. People said, why is nobody at our athletic events?
Sure.
Why are there no events on campus? Like, why is there just Temple Fest? And then I believe last semester there was 1 event.
Mm-hmm.
You don't see student government. You don't see these activities. And when you commit to a college, oftentimes it's to go and have that community and build those connections and just have a good time.
100%, yeah, for sure. Kind of looking at your personal feelings, what is a policy initiative that you feel as if is the most pressing or you just like the most?
Okay, so like the most, I think it's pretty obvious, specifically if you watch the debate. I love the Student Senate idea.
Sure.
I love the Student Senate idea. Most pressing, I would say, is safety.
Yeah.
Always. Safety and structure are the 2 S's are always going to be the top priority. Another one of my favorites, Chick-fil-A breakfast.
Yeah,
I know
it's a fun one.
Yeah, and I know there was just something posted that said that it wasn't possible, and I actually wanted to address that because we did a lot of research into all of our policies.
Mm-hmm.
Every single one of our policies was something that has been done by at least like 3 schools by their student government in the span of a year.
Sure.
So it's something that we really wanted to push for, and Chick-fil-A breakfast was one of those where it was just like, why not? Like, that sounds so fun.
Yeah.
And we also currently, you have J&H, Panera, and maybe you don't even have Freshens for breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
So Chick-fil-A was just one that gets a lot of traction on campus. It gives more opportunity for workers to get in there, which is never a bad thing, giving people of North Philadelphia more shifts, more time to work if they chose to work.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just a fun one. And Kutztown recently did it.
Okay.
So it's one of those that we know can happen. I'm actively in communication with RMARC. I have been for majority of the past semester. So that connection's already built, and we don't see it as being a hard one to implement at all.
Got you. Yeah. Yeah. And focusing on the Student Senate, what's your vision for that? What are their, outline responsibilities? Tell me a little bit about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I am going to pull it up just because
of course, yeah.
There are 3 branches of government that we've built. We have a whole
got you.
structure. So it's one of those that I do have to kind of recheck.
100%.
So as I said, 3 branches of government. The first one would be legislative.
Mm-hmm.
So this will actually be going live on our Instagram later today, but it's basically you have your legislative branch and then you have a speaker. The speaker would be voted on by the senators, and the senators are voted on by the students.
Okay.
So the current structure that we're looking at is one that we think is feasible for the next school year. We don't want to implement one that we think is really dense and hard to accomplish, specifically with the lack of engagement that we're going into this with. Student government doesn't have a ton of engagement.
Right.
So we have to be reasonable. This isn't how we want to leave it. We want more engagement. We want more, but this is what we have to start with. It's a starting point, not the end.
Mm-hmm.
So we want 5 senators from each class and then 1 senator from each school. Hopefully those 5 senators will fill in all of that. So we'd have 1 theater kid, 1 CLA kid, 1 Fox kid, etc. And then they would be able to vote on being in committees. So that would include a public safety, a health and wellness, budget and allocation, diversity, and student life committee. Those are some that we think are very important, just because they are.
Right.
And then under diversity, we also have several different like breakdowns. So smaller committees within a big committee, which would be accessibility, interfaith, international students, etc. We also have student life that would include Greek life, housing, athletes, activities, but those are just smaller committees that are formed within the bigger communities based on what the student senators want to see happen, what they think is most important. Because by building the student senate, you're opening up the ground to more students to come and give their opinion, give their perspective. It's something that's voted on by all those senators, which hopefully by the time we're done, we have more engagement and we can build more senators into that. We're a school of 21,000 undergraduate students. That doesn't even include, technically we're 40,000 when you look at our graduate and med school and law school and Ambler and Center City. Like, we have so many students, 5 students from each grade simply is not enough, but it's enough to start. And by building these committees, by having these different committees focusing on different things, you're able to bring forth more and do more, because it's just more students voting, more students actively wanting to be a part of it instead of just filling a position. And then we have our executive branch, which would be voted on. The vice president and president will be voted on, as well as the chief of staff. And then we'd have 2 different branches, like committees underneath them. And one of those would be a transition committee, which is broken down into smaller committees. The transition would be for first generation students, transfer students, out-of-state students, and graduate students. We want to put that under the executive for right now, just because we know students that already want to apply for those positions. And not in the sense that they're just going to be appointed, but in the sense that, like, we are concerned that they won't be filled in Senate as of now. Hopefully those can be moved over to Senate at a later date when we have more engagement. And then also leadership and service. Those are always going to be under the executive branch. That's internal relations and external relations. That's just always going to be under the executive branch. That's how it's set up at many other universities. For example, one of the main ones we looked at was University of Florida. They have a very dense one that we just kind of shortened a little, made it more plausible and easier to execute. Sorry, I know this is a long one.
No, that's fine. Please.
And then we have our judicial, which this is going to be voted on. So we have 2 different branches under the judicial. It breaks down into 2, which would be the election supervisors, which would be voted on by the senators to find one person that kind of supersedes and like watches over the election commissioners, make sure there's no bias, etc. And then election commissioners is just how many people want to run the election, how many people want to be in charge of ensuring that it's a fair election.
Gotcha.
And then you have your Supreme Court, which the Supreme Court Justice, Chief Justice, would be appointed by the senators. And then you would have your other justices, which would just be anybody that really wants it, can be kind of like appointed by the Senate. And their job is to make sure that there are no conduct violations within Student Senate. Everyone does what their respective roles are supposed to be. But the main goal with Student Senate, and that was just the structure, but the main goal of Student Senate is to act as another method of bringing in different perspectives. So if students want something to happen, like we have 9 pages of policies. We could have 500 pages of policies. We don't. That wouldn't be possible. But somewhere within those other 491, I don't know if I did that math right, but let's say I did.
Close enough.
Close enough. Somewhere within those pages, there's another policy that we didn't bring forth, and no other committee or campaign has brought forth in Temple's time, let's say, or hasn't been passed. And student senators can bring that forth. We also want to make it so that student senators and the VP and president will be at town halls, where instead of it's us speaking at students, students come and speak to us.
Yeah.
What do you want to see? What changes do you need to ensure that you're more comfortable, it's more inclusive, and that you're just having a good time? College is about learning, but it's also about so much more. It's an experience in and of itself.
Yeah.
Also, I know that I addressed this at the campaign, but it was mentioned, and I do want to bring it up. One moment, I'm pulling it up.
No, all good.
So in the Constitution, in Article 1, it says that the president and chief judge must create an interim auditing committee working to develop a more effective structure in place of Parliament. So what that means basically is just that there was supposed to be 2 years ago something put in place of a student parliament to ensure that there is still that student representation, that there is still those diverse perspectives, instead of it just being an executive branch that appoints a ton of committees. That's one of those violations that I mentioned in the debate yesterday.
Okay.
One of 4, which I can get into the other 3.
Yeah.
But for that one specifically, it was just, it should have been done and it hasn't been done.
Gotcha.
Why hasn't it been done? There's a lot you can do about that. I will always argue that Temple students are passionate, they're driven, they care. So if they want this to happen, they will. I mean, right now, we're getting so much traction on campus. Like, people are seeing me and seeing our logo and going, you're running for student government president. I didn't see that last year. Like, there are also the students that still don't know student government exists, but that's something we're working to combat. That's why we're campaigning so heavily. It's just, you should know what we're doing for you. You should know that you can have a voice that you don't have at the moment. And that's part of the reason why I'm so passionate about Student Senate. But yeah.
Yeah, no, 100%. No, that's a lot to think about. And I think it was good to kind of clear those things up, because it can sometimes be confusing, all the bureaucracy that's, in that. Moving on to another policy point, I guess. You kind of touch on it a little bit, but I think that Temple students are not shy to make their opinion known, which is something that really makes this university special. So, how would you two work to support freedom of speech and freedom of expression, and a student's right to assemble?
Yeah, I mean, I said this during the debate. Students have every right to protest, have every right to do everything that they have constitutional rights to do. But part of that is also abiding by student code of conduct.
Right.
Making sure that students know where they can protest, where they can't protest, what the rules of protesting are, is super important. So you don't run into issues like organizations having issues protesting or issues registering spaces on campus. Fun fact, to register a space at the bell tower and to protest at the bell tower, you're supposed to reserve that space. I didn't know that. I actually got in trouble for trying to set up like a little meeting with my friends there, because I didn't know you can't do that without reserving that space. You can only rally on the chorus without a reserved space at the bell tower. So stuff like that, it's stuff that's important to note. The new protesting guidelines, the ones where it separates students, I think that's always a good thing, making sure everyone's safe, specifically when there are such vast countering differences, regardless of what it is. But just making sure students know their rights is a big one. And making sure that everyone just like knows that they have a place. We're a school of activists. Yeah. You can see it everywhere.
100%. Yeah. Another issue that's, top of mind for stakeholders and students alike every year and almost every second here at Temple is campus safety. I know you mentioned the blue light system, which, both campaigns really agree that needs, change and it needs to be checked and whatnot. Are there any other initiatives you'd like to highlight in your campus safety policy?
I mean, just safety as a whole is so important. And one of our big ones is Narcan and fraternity houses.
Okay.
At the moment, Narcan has to be purchased by the fraternities, and then they get training, but it's like kind of wishy-washy.
Sure.
I have some friends in fraternities, and they were explaining the process to me, and I was like, do you really know what the process is? Because he was like, no, I don't. I did it, and I still don't understand the process.
Gotcha.
So it's making that, first off, easily accessible to all students, not just fraternities. Having it accessible in residence halls, in fraternity houses. We want to set up designated places in fraternity houses just because if there's one place where we think it would be the most prevalent, it would probably be in a fraternity house.
Sure.
Whether we like it or not, college students are partying, and
Right.
there are substances
100%.
that might not supposed to be there.
Yeah.
But creating designated areas where everyone knows this is where you go, and there is a brother that is trained to administer Narcan here, is so important, and everyone should have one of those. I mean, just for safety.
Yeah.
And yeah, just Narcan. I will always push for Narcan on campus. I will always push to have Narcan in backpacks. I think
Sure.
it's always a big one. I know my freshman year, someone handed me one on campus one day, and I had it in my backpack for like all year, and then it expired. But it's one of those where it's like, you have to know that this is happening on a college campus.
Yeah.
You have to know that that drugs are being in use, and there's always a risk.
Right.
And we want to try to reduce the risk of that
Sure.
leading to really bad circumstances.
Right. Of course.
The best way we can.
Yeah.
But yeah, just safety. But I will always advocate for Narcan usage.
100%. Yeah. For me, another big thing too is community engagement. I know that's, a big issue for you guys. Not only looking at how TSG interacts with students or how the university interacts with students in the events, but I also, really prioritize myself, the overall relationship between students, the university, and the community that surrounds Temple. So, tell me a little bit about your policy and your initiatives in that realm.
Yeah. So there was actually a discussion that I know went around on TikTok for a while, a couple months ago, about students. A lot of students, at least in CLI, have to take a seminar at the beginning of the year where you learn about all the different programs at Temple. So Ideal, you learn about Ideal.
Yeah.
The TUPD comes and speaks, stuff like that. And I think something that is so important is teaching about the surrounding area, knowing the culture in the surrounding area, because I came in from a town that isn't so different from Philly. So it wasn't like a crazy drastic cultural shock to me, but for some students it is. They've never experienced inner city life or the dangers, but also the positives that comes from it. And one big thing for us is educating students on the surrounding area, how to be respectful to your neighbors, because there's a high school right down the street.
Yeah.
And we have to be respectful of them. It's their home more than it is ours. We're here for 4 years, maybe 5, or 4+1, and
sure.
graduate students. We're not here for the entirety of our lives.
Yep.
There are people that live here full time with kids that we have to respect. And stuff like that is just so important. Educating them on how to be respectful neighbors is so, so important. Another thing we want to do that I know kind of exists is community engagement, going out and getting ideas from the neighbors, getting ideas from the people that reside in North Philadelphia, what they think is affecting them and what they think needs to change to help lower that effect.
Sure.
And that kind of sort of exists, but it is one of those that we want to make that more public.
Yeah.
That file comes right back to transparency. Another one that I know I mentioned at the debate is just, this also ties in with STARS requirements. In my hometown and the town next to us, Paterson, New Jersey, we had a lot of engagement with high school students. Getting college students to go and motivate and help them and tutor them and stuff like that. And I think that's a great one that can also help with STARS requirements. I mentioned the wrestling team. We have a wrestler on our campaign staff. So getting that STARS requirement was always hard because nobody actually wanted to go if they could do something correlated with wrestling. So there was that conflict of being able to have that resource to go and actually do something. But the pitch to go and speak to them about why wrestling helped them and how it can help students in the surrounding area is always a good one. But just more engagement with them. I think there's this, at most inner city schools, you see students learning about how to engage with the city that they're in.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't really see that here. And
Right.
that's kind of sad to me.
Yeah, 100%. So you mentioned some of the 4 things that you alleged that, let me know if you want to, that the current TSG administration had not followed according to the Constitution, if I'm right. You mentioned 1. Would you like to speak on the other 3?
Yeah, I would actually. So so the first one I mentioned was the lack of, or at least us knowing whether they've voted to reinstate something like Parliament, or whether they've, what has happened with that at all since its disbandment in 2022. That was a complete violation of the student government constitution that can be found on the website and on Owl Connect.
Okay.
There's also, I'm looking at my notes. All amendments to the election code and constitution had to be posted 6 months in advance to the commencement of elections. Me and Billy, while we were trying to run, we did not gain access to that until 2 weeks in advance.
Okay.
We had been emailing back and forth with TSG, and we never got them. I had to specifically ask for them like 3 times in emails to actually have the documents. I was like, please forward them to me. I can't find them. Where it says they are, it isn't. I'm sending them screenshots, and I just couldn't find it. And 6 months in advance to 2 weeks, I can acknowledge all the hard work, but that feels almost like they're trying to withhold students, or not trying to, but just by accident.
Okay.
Stopping students from knowing how to run or how to be involved. And I don't believe it's malicious by any means, but it is something that needs to be addressed, because in their constitution, it says 6 months in advance, and it wasn't posted 6 months in advance. They were still editing it when we emailed them 2 weeks in advance. And then this one is, the election committee must lead the planning and execution of at least 1 event per month designated to engage students, increase Temple student government visibility, and increase student participation in elections. One big thing that should be noted is that the election committee positions to apply to be part of the election committee wasn't even posted until February 10th of 2025. That is barely over a month ago. When you're supposed to be holding events once a month from the beginning of fall semester to encourage engagement, and you don't even post the application for the committee that is supposed to be running said events until a month before the commencement of elections, that's just a violation. Once again, it's one of those things that's supposed to be being done and isn't. And then also, the election committee shall produce a detailed published election schedule at least 6 months in advance. That's another one. The 6 months in advance are 2 different policies, so that is the 4th.
Okay.
Even though it kind of seems like it could be one.
Got you.
We actually got, I don't know if this was noted, the election committee pushed back application deadlines by, I believe, 4 days. I might be doing that math wrong, but it was extended into March 3rd. Because we were like, we didn't have enough time to prepare this because we didn't have all the documents we needed. And we didn't even know when applications were due until you posted it 2 weeks before, and that isn't abiding by the Constitution. So we got an extension that was really helpful. It actually allowed us to get on the ballot. We wouldn't have made the ballot because there are requirements that you need that we didn't expect. So that includes, you need a campaign manager, a communications director, and a finance director. We didn't know that, and we wouldn't have known that because we didn't have the documents. And building a team takes time. And without having those, like their constitution states they're supposed to, it made it very difficult. So those are the 4 violations. There is also going to be a formally written letter going up on our Instagram also later tonight to address those, because I know the election commissioner actually made a statement to the Temple News asking for us to elaborate. So that's me elaborating.
Sure. Yeah, no, I know you didn't have time at the debate when you mentioned those. So I was just, giving you the opportunity to elaborate on those, which I think is helpful. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, on that point, the opinion section did push back on some of your initiatives and policies. I'd love to give you the opportunity to respond to those if you'd like to as well.
Yeah, I mean, I addressed the Chick-fil-A one
Right.
because that one actually really hurt my feelings because I did a lot of research into that one. It is very possible, and it is just straight disinformation to say that we have to completely change the franchise. It's
Okay.
all run through Aramark.
Okay.
All of it. Zadie's is run through Aramark. Chick-fil-A is run through Aramark. Saladworks run through Aramark. It's all run through Aramark. Anything that uses a meal swipe at, I'm almost certain, is run through Aramark. So knowing that we looked into that, knowing that Cutsdown recently did it, it's one of those where it's like, that is most certainly applicable. It's also one that we've seen student governments across the nation accomplish. I mean, I believe it's Florida Atlantic. I believe they also just instituted that, or at least
Okay.
when I was looking at that. That was also back in June. I've been working on this since June. So a lot of this is just like research that I've been looking into for months.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so that was one of those that like I was like, I really did look into that. Like, I know that's possible.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also know that they said a lot of our policies weren't possible, but all of our policies, every single one of them has been done, at least at one university in America. So the concept that it isn't possible is just wrong. And I think if any students can do it, it's us. It's Temple students, not my campaign, but Temple students. We're driven, we're capable, we're passionate. Why wouldn't we be able to accomplish those things? So I would just say that, you know, everyone has a right to their opinion, but coming for the campaign in a way that says that we don't know what we're doing or we haven't done the research into what we're doing simply isn't true, because we have done a lot of research. We have spent a lot of time on this campaign. As I said, we started back in June. And that's why it kind of upset me a little, I won't lie. I also know that they said that in the debate, I seemed a lot less prepared. I was really anxious, and I feel like a lot of people can understand that.
Sure.
Speaking in front of a crowd is very anxiety driven, and it was a difficult one for me. I was also under, as I mentioned earlier, I was under the impression that I was gonna have my VP up there with me. And if I didn't, I also thought we were gonna have chairs because last year they had chairs, and I was in heels and just really anxious. And yeah, I don't think it came from a lack of preparedness, because if there's one thing I know, it's my policies. I do think my less eloquent delivery really did just come from the fact that I was insanely anxious and yeah, just in a position where I was extremely uncomfortable. And typically I really did think I would have somebody up there kind of just being like, you got this. But then I like didn't.
Sure. Yeah, no worries. Yeah, so if there's anything that you think I left out, something you're really pumped on that you want to share, please do. And tell the people why they should vote for you.
Yeah, I mean, voting opens at the time of filming this, 6 hours and 5 minutes. So obviously we would love the support. Also, we care. We're trying to make it so that students have more of a voice than they have in 2 years. We're not trying to silence our students. We're trying to give power back to the students. And I think that is so important. And I think that's part of the reason that anyone should vote for somebody, is because when you see somebody running that wants to take power away from their current position, it's something you don't see very often. And it's something that we really, really want to do. We want to give power back to the students. Also, we can bring Chick-fil-A breakfast to the SAC and Dead Week. I love the policy for dead week. I need the policy for dead week. Please, please vote for us so that I can have a dead week. Even if you don't want it, please. Even though I see no reason why anyone wouldn't want a dead week.
Sure, yeah.
But yeah, and it really all does just come back to we genuinely care for all our students. I'm going to speak for Billy here. We really just want to do what is best for the general student body and make changes that students actually want to see.
Thank you to both campaigns for joining me on this episode. And remember, you can vote online tomorrow, Wednesday, March 26th, and Thursday, March 27th. And election results will be released on Friday, March 28th. I'm Paulo Rocco, podcast editor for the Temple News, and this is Reprint.